your OpenAPI GET endpoint automatically becomes an AI-callable tool. But that's just the starting point for customization. We'll trace exactly how FastMCP processes this route definition, from the first match wins RouteMap logic that determines component type, to the automatic handling of path parameters, query arrays with explode equals true serialization, and header string conversion. You'll see why the operationId becomes the tool's callable name, while the summary provides documentation, and how to explicitly configure resources or resource templates when the default tool behavior doesn't match your API's semantic needs.
Paths, users, get, tags, users, public, operationId, list users, summary, list all users.
This demonstrates declarative API transformation, where OpenAPI specifications are converted into MCP components through explicit route mapping rules while maintaining full HTTP protocol compatibility. The system uses a first match wins approach with RouteMap configurations to determine component types, with GET endpoints commonly mapped to resources or resource templates when explicitly configured, or defaulting to tools when no RouteMap is provided. The transformation preserves all original HTTP behaviors while adding MCP interface capabilities, including automatic handling of path parameters, query arrays, and header conversion. The conversion process evaluates each OpenAPI path against ordered RouteMap rules that specify HTTP methods, path patterns, and OpenAPI tags to determine the resulting MCP component type. Path parameters undergo automatic none filtering and presence validation, while query arrays use explode equals true serialization by default, and path arrays use comma-separated values. Header parameters are automatically converted to strings, and the operationId becomes the MCP callable name with the summary serving as documentation. This creates a direct one mapping between OpenAPI metadata and MCP interface elements, while maintaining the original API's authentication and parameter requirements. This pattern eliminates manual tool definition while providing precise control over API exposure to AI systems. The approach excels when integrating existing REST APIs with MCP clients, particularly for internal systems where development speed outweighs perfect UX optimization. The trade-off is that auto-generated components may require additional RouteMap configuration for optimal AI usability compared to handcrafted MCP servers, especially for complex APIs with many endpoints and parameters. Let's break it down line by line. This defines the OpenAPI specification route that FastMCP converts to MCP components. Without a RouteMap, GET endpoints default to tools, but most production APIs use RouteMap with MCP type, resource to create resources or resource templates instead. Path parameters are required and validated, with arrays serialized as comma-separated values in paths and explode equals true for query arrays. Headers auto-convert to strings, while authentication context like tenanted integrates via the context parameter. The conversion preserves HTTP compatibility while adding MCP capabilities, using first match wins logic for type assignment when RouteMap is configured.
Paths.
The paths object defines all API endpoints in OpenAPI format, where each key represents a URL path containing supported HTTP methods. Without explicit RouteMap configuration, GET endpoints default to MCP tools, but most production implementations use RouteMap with MCP type, resource to create resources or resource templates instead. Path parameters are required by default and undergo automatic none filtering, while query arrays use explode equals true serialization and path arrays use comma-separated values. Header parameters automatically convert to strings, and RouteMap applies first match wins logic for type assignment, preserving HTTP compatibility while adding MCP capabilities like authentication context integration.
Users.
Defines the user's REST endpoint in OpenAPI format, which FastMCP converts to an MCP tool by default when no RouteMap is specified. GET endpoints typically become resources when using RouteMap with MCP type. Resource, following first match wins logic for type assignment. Path parameters are required and validated automatically, with arrays using comma-separated values in paths and explode equals true for query arrays. Header parameters convert to strings, while authentication context like tenanted integrates through the standard context parameter. This preserves HTTP compatibility while enabling MCP accessibility, with the operationId, list users, serving as the tool name and summary as documentation.
GET.
Defines the HTTP GET method handler for the user's endpoint. Without explicit RouteMap configuration, GET endpoints default to creating tools in FastMCP, where operationId becomes the callable tool name and summary provides interface documentation. When using RouteMap with MCP type, resource, the same endpoint becomes a resource or resource template instead, following first match wins logic. Path parameters are validated for presence and automatically filtered for none values, while query arrays use explode equals true, serialization and path arrays use comma-separated values. Header parameters are string converted by default, and the system preserves HTTP identity while adding MCP capabilities like authentication context integration.
Tags, users, public.
The tags array organizes OpenAPI endpoints into logical groups, directly mapping to MCP component categories during FastMCP conversion. Without explicit RouteMap configuration, this GET endpoint becomes an MCP tool with list users as its callable name, preserving HTTP semantics while gaining AI accessibility. FastMCP's conversion process handles parameter types distinctly. Path parameters become required fields with automatic none filtering. Query arrays use explode equals true serialization. Path arrays use comma-separated values, and headers convert to strings. RouteMap configurations, when present, override defaults using first match wins logic, commonly transforming GET endpoints into resources or resource templates while maintaining the original OpenAPI structure.
OperationId, list users.
The operationId sets the MCP callable name for this endpoint when no RouteMap is configured. Without explicit routing rules, GET endpoints default to MCP tools with this ID while preserving their original HTTP behavior. FastMCP enforces strict parameter handling. Path parameters become required fields with automatic none validation. Query arrays use explode equals true serialization. Path arrays use comma-separated values, and headers convert to strings. RouteMap can override this to create resources instead, using first match wins type assignment logic.
Summary, list all users.
The summary field provides the human-readable description for this endpoint that appears in both OpenAPI documentation and the MCP interface. Without an explicit RouteMap configuration, FastMCP automatically converts this GET endpoint into a callable tool where the operationId, list users, becomes the tool name, while preserving the original HTTP path and method for compatibility. When using RouteMap with MCP type, resource, this same endpoint would instead become a resource-resource template following first match wins type assignment rules, with path parameters validated as required and array parameters handled differently. Query arrays use explode equals true by default, while path arrays use comma-separated values. Header parameters are automatically converted to strings during this OpenAPI to MCP conversion process. closing brace completes the OpenAPI operation definition for get users. Without an explicit route map, FastMCP converts this to an MCP tool using operationId as the callable name and summary for documentation. Path parameters become required inputs with automatic none filtering, while query arrays use explode equals true serialization and path arrays use comma-separated values. Header parameters auto-convert to strings, and the route matching follows first match wins logic when RouteMap is present. For production APIs, you'd typically use RouteMap with MCP type, resource to create proper resource template endpoints instead of default tools. This defines a GET endpoint that FastMCP converts to an AI-callable tool when no RouteMap is configured. The operationId becomes the tool's name in MCP, while summary provides the documentation visible to AI clients. Path parameters are automatically validated for presence and type, with arrays and paths using comma-separated values, while query arrays use explode equals true serialization. Headers convert to strings automatically. For production APIs, you typically use RouteMap with MCP type, resource, to create queryable resources instead of tools, following first match wins type assignment logic. The endpoint remains fully HTTP compatible while gaining MCP capabilities. This closing brace finalizes the OpenAPI path definition that FastMCP will convert to an MCP component. Without an explicit route map, GET endpoints default to tools using operationId as the callable name, while RouteMap configuration typically creates resources or resource templates for res-tful operations. Path parameters become required fields with automatic none filtering. Query arrays use explode equals true serialization, and path arrays default to comma-separated values. Header parameters convert to strings automatically, preserving HTTP semantics while enabling MCP compatibility through the OpenAPI to MCP conversion layer. Closes the OpenAPI path definition for users. Without explicit RouteMap configuration, FastMCP converts get endpoints to MCP tools by default, using operationId, list users, as the tool name and summary as documentation. Path parameters become required inputs with automatic none filtering, while query arrays use explode equals true serialization and path arrays use comma-separated values. Headers auto-convert to strings. This preserves HTTP compatibility while enabling MCP capabilities, with RouteMap offering first match wins control to override defaults and create resources or resource templates instead. OpenAPI to MCP conversion. FastMCP transforms OpenAPI specifications into MCP components through explicit RouteMap declarations, where unmatched endpoints default to tools, while GET requests commonly become resources or resource templates when configured. RouteMap evaluation follows first match wins logic, with ordered pattern checking determining whether an endpoint becomes a resource template, or falls back to tool behavior. Path parameters undergo automatic none-value filtering and required parameter validation, with query arrays using explode equals true serialization by default, while path arrays use comma-separated values. Header parameters are automatically converted to strings and included in HTTP requests, maintaining compatibility with existing REST APIs while gaining MCP capabilities.
The specification that becomes both document and interface needs no translation between them.